With brothers like that, who needs friends?
Who needs
Wow.
enemies? Who needs
They say
enemies?
family can be tough. That's pretty tough. I was wondering this morning if any of you find that in your own personality, you might have more than just one characteristic. You know, some days you're this way and some days you're that way. You know, our Peanuts characters are kind of like that. We have two Peanut characters actually who are the two characteristics of someone pretty famous. Charlie Brown, he was that optimist, wasn't he? He was that kind of down and out kind of guy, a realist, you know, and then there was his sidekick, Snoopy. Snoopy was a dreamer. He just could dream about all sorts of strange things. And Charlie Brown and Snoopy were the two parts of Charles Schulz, the cartoonist. If you remember, Charles Schulz grew up kind of like that wallflower kind of kid. And that was Charlie Brown. But he also had a dreamer side to him. A dream that he would one day be a great cartoonist. And his dream came true with a lot of hard work. Snoopy was that dreamer. If you remember, he was always laying on top of his famous doghouse, right on his back. And he would have all sorts of dreams, like he would be a world famous author. And in the next screen, he would be sitting at a typewriter typing away. Some of you remember what that typewriter looks like, right? Typewriter where you hit the button. And he'd be typing away, and every story began with, it was this dark, stormy night. He also had a very famous dream that was all over the world at the time. It was when he was a flying ace pilot in World War I. He used to fly his doghouse, right, with the Red Baron, and then he'd get shot down behind enemy lines and he'd be crawling through the grass wearing his French scarf. Snoopy was quite the dreamer. Well, today's Old Testament text is very similar to this mix between a realist and a dreamer. Because see, Joseph was having one of those real kind of days in his life. It was really in the pits, wasn't it? Literally. Tossed into the dry pit. But how he got there was because of two things. One, he was his father's favorite son. That was a problem because Joseph was the youngest. But not so much that. I mean, Reuben and the others, they kind of let that go. But the problem they really had with Joseph was that he was a dreamer. And he had these dreams, I mean, these outlandish dreams. And then he would tell his brothers about how, hey, I had a dream last night where I was greater than you. What? Yeah. How to win friends and influence, right? And then the next day, I mean, it wasn't just one, it was repeated after repeated, where Joseph would wake up and he would come to his brothers and said, I had another dream where I am going to be so much greater than you that you will bow down to me. Can you imagine how that offended his brothers? I mean, first of all, you're the youngest twerp. You're not allowed to say that kind of stuff. And second of all, that's not how the world works, Joseph. The world does not work that way. That's not the order. That's not our history. That's not our tradition. That's not our culture. The first son is the one who inherits. The first son is the one that the rest of us look up to. Who are you to say such a crazy, crazy thing? And Joseph continues to be a dreamer. The problem is, his brothers don't like that. So they have to shut this guy up. So they throw him in the pit to get rid of him. Do any of you remember your dreams? Do you ever wake up in the morning and go, oh, I completely forgot I had a great dream, but I don't remember what it was? And then there's sometimes when you're thinking like, I had the best dream in the world, and you remember it so vividly. Or perhaps maybe when you were a little bit younger, you had this dream. A dream that you were going to be somebody and live somewhere and have a certain kind of life. I myself remember that I had this wonderful dream. I was going to be very rich. I was going to be very famous. I was going to be a world famous architect. And I was going to design things that would have my name all over them, all around the world. Clearly then I woke up. And the realist comes to stay. But the interesting thing about Joseph was he held on to his dreams. And he talked about them. And he shared them. The problem was, people don't like dreams that don't go with what we think should happen. They don't like things that aren't status quo. They don't like things that aren't the way they're always supposed to be or ought to be. Executives, if you take a leadership training or if you take something where they tell you how people grow tremendous businesses in this world, they have something called BHADs. B-H-A-D. It's short for big, hairy, audacious dreams. And those are the ones that propel people way into the stratosphere. Those are the ones that make big business, big success. Those are the ones that get people big names. Charles Schultz, a complete wallflower, a guy who failed all sorts of classes, a guy who was picked on repeatedly, a guy who knew what bullies were before we even started to know about bullies, had one of those dreams. A God-sized dream. A one so big that only God could make it happen. And he became a world-famous cartoonist. A love that God had planted in his heart and a dream that he had been given, and he hung on to it. Well, Joseph had that kind of a dream. Just wrapped with God around it. And the only way it was going to happen was if God intervened in his life. And so God says, Reuben, your brother's in the pit. We can't have that. So Reuben says, hey brothers, this isn't a good idea. We don't want to hurt him. His blood spilt won't help us. Let's just sell him. And God uses that to continue the God-sized dream that he had for Joseph. I don't know if you know how that story ends, but Joseph becomes somebody pretty famous, doesn't he? And I'm not talking about being second in command in Egypt. I'm talking about the fact that in 2015, we're sitting on the beach in Summers Point, New Jersey, and who are we talking about? Joseph and his God-sized dream. I believe that we have dreams. Some of them are our own dreams. Some of them are things that we want for ourselves or maybe even for our loved ones. But there are other dreams that I think we quickly dismiss. That's crazy. That'll never happen. I'm the youngest boy in a whole line of boys. I'll never amount to anything. And then here's Joseph telling his brothers they should bow down to him. I know how Joseph feels. I'm the youngest of 4 boys in my family. And my older brothers still don't know that they're supposed to bow down to me. But Joseph was given a God-sized dream, and he hung on to it. Each and every one of us is given a God-sized dream for our lives. And that's the one, no matter how big and hairy and audacious it is, if it's a God-sized dream, if it's a God dream for our lives, if it's powered by God and directed by God, we need to hang on to it. Don't dismiss it so quickly. Because who knows? In 2215, there may be people sitting on this beach talking about you and the dream God gave in your life. Hang on.
Amen.
And dare to dream. Amen.